And I'm Laverne.
And welcome to this episode of Cooking Crave. Today we are bringing you the wonderful rhubarb that is so in season right now. We're going to bring to you a couple recipes with rhubarb muffins and rhubarb bars. And here is Laverne to show us how to make these wonderful seasonal dishes.
Okay, and like I said, it's the season for rhubarb, and this is the first pickings is always the best. It's the most tender and just most flavorful before it gets a little bit tough. And your red rhubarb is really just, you know, the best. But I mean, I have a couple plants. I have some red and I have one that's not as red. They're both still really good, but you know, your red I think is still always the best. And I usually cut about this size, you know, for, you know, going into my muffins or bars and that, you know, you want to find a fairly, you know, small pieces.
Okay.
But we're going to start with rhubarb muffins. And this is definitely a favorite. It goes over well. They're so easy to put together. You start with 1 1/4 cups. I need a spoon. Brown sugar. So we'll put that in there. And then you use 1 cup buttermilk.
Now, is something like this, you know, what does this make for quantity? Is it just a dozen, or do you have a 2 dozen that we're making out of this?
This makes 2 dozen muffins, very nice, you know, very nice sized muffins. So
okay. So
you're got to, you know, a fair amount, you know, when you say 2 dozen. And 1 egg, you put that in there. And then it asks for a 1/2 cup of oil. And I just happen to have canola oil. Again, just use whatever oil you have in your cupboard. I probably would not use olive oil in a recipe like this. But your vegetable oil, your corn oil, any of that will be just fine.
okay.
And then it asks for 2 teaspoons vanilla. And we just kind of measure there. Yeah, so I'm going to just mix up the wet ingredients with the brown sugar just for a little bit, and then we'll add the flour. And the recipe calls for 2 1/2 cups flour, so I already have that pre-measured.
So when you're making, and we were talking about this makes a big batch with 2 dozen, is this something that you can freeze? Do they freeze well?
Oh, very well.
Okay.
They freeze very well. So now we'll add our 2 1/2 cups flour. And it asks for a teaspoon of baking powder and a teaspoon of baking soda.
Okay.
So we'll...
But you can't mess up on that then.
No, you shouldn't. We know we're adding both, so we
And
can't.
if it's the same quantity, we're all good.
That's right. So now I'm going to use a 1/2 teaspoon of salt there. And now we're just going to put the mixer on low, and so we don't have flour flying all over. And you can use a hand mixer, and even this here you can even beat with a spoon if you don't have a mixer that you want, because it's not something that if you don't beat really thoroughly that it's not going to turn out. You can, like I said, just
you're basically just combining the ingredients then.
Right. So just use a little elbow grease and whip it up with a spoon will work also. Okay.
Now rhubarb pretty much is, I mean, it comes back every year. You don't have to do anything for those people that may not have a rhubarb plant but like the taste of rhubarb. Once you plant it, it generally comes back every year, and you don't really have to do anything but
just
cut it and make it and
That's
eat it.
right. You know, you have your wonderful rhubarb pies, you know, jellies. Rhubarb strawberry jelly is a good favorite and goes over well. And that, so it's amazing all the things you can do with rhubarb. putting it in cakes and breads and all that. So we're just kind of highlighting a little bit, a couple of recipes that, I've used in the past and really have liked. So here we are. We just got that mixed up. And we're going to add our rhubarb. It calls for 3 cups rhubarb. And I had this rhubarb, and when I was cutting, I had probably about 3.5 to 3 3/4 cup rhubarb. I'm just going to add it. That little extra rhubarb will be just fine. You don't want to throw that out or waste it. If you put it in the fridge, by the time you use it, it's probably going to spoil. So usually when I make it, I end up adding usually about 1/2 to a cup more rhubarb than the recipe calls for, because it just makes them really nice and moist. And then I just gonna just mix that up.
So you don't have to compensate for the other ingredients if you do happen to throw in a little bit more rhubarb.
Not at all. It's gonna turn out just perfect.
Now, if just for those people that maybe not have cooked with rhubarb, if you're not going to use it, like you were saying, you don't want it to spoil in the fridge, do you just not cut it then? Does it stay fresh on, when it just hasn't been cut, or is there a length of time that you want to actually cut it outside as well before it spoils?
If you say the rhubarb is ready to be picked, and because if you don't pick it when it's ready, it can go to seed, so then you've lost a lot of the rhubarb. Pick it, just don't wash it. Put it in the fridge. You can put it in like a plastic bag or whatever, and as long as you don't wash it, you probably can keep it for at least a week or even up to 2 weeks. I already have.
Okay.
And it'll keep. It might not be as crisp or as firm, even if it gets a little wilty. It bakes up just as good.
Okay.
So we have that mixed. So we have our muffin tins here ready to go, and I just chose to use paper muffin things, but you can certainly just spray your pan. You don't need to use paper muffins if you don't choose to do so.
If you're going to freeze them, this probably is a better choice to do it that way, though.
It probably would work, just nice. And if you're taking them to a function or anything like that, it's just nice to have the paper muffins on there, and then pans are a lot easier to clean.
Definitely.
So when I do this, I use a good spoonful like this per muffin tin. And when you're doing that, you look at all that rhubarb and you think, oh my, that seems like a lot of rhubarb, but it isn't. It just really bakes up terrific. And like I said, it just makes a nice moist muffin. And I did already preheat my oven to 350. That's what you're going to preheat your oven at, is 350. And it takes about, I usually bake them at about, it says 20 to 25 minutes. And I usually like to go the 25 minutes.
Do you find that because you added a little bit more rhubarb, you need a little bit more baking time then?
Not necessarily. It's just that I find that I like it baked just a few minutes longer than the 20 minutes, so I would go the 25.
Okay. It's a rather thick dough, isn't it?
It is. It is, but it just...
And I think anytime you're baking and you have that smell going throughout the house, it's making me hungry already.
Yeah. And I'm going to put that last one in there. And what I'm going to do, we put a cinnamon streusel on top. So I'm going to melt just a couple of teaspoons of butter here. Okay. And put a little sugar and cinnamon in, because we're going to put that on top of the rhubarb muffins.
Okay, you do that before you bake it then?
Yes. Okay, now I just took a little bowl and melted 2 tablespoons of my butter, and I'm going to put a 1/3 cup sugar in here, and a generous teaspoon of cinnamon, because I really like that cinnamon flavor on there. And we'll just mix that up here, and then we'll just put a little bit of that on each muffin, and it just makes a little streusel on top of that.
And you just combine that well until it's all,
Yeah,
the
you're just
butter's
going to, right,
in there.
just to mix that and mix that cinnamon well in there.
When I find that this is the best part of the muffin.
Is that streusel part, yep.
I think there was a Seinfeld episode at one time that had the muffin tops, which they're the best part of the muffin.
Right, you can really decorate that muffin with the toppings for sure. Okay, so now let's just take about a 1/4 teaspoon and put it, and I just, I put that on, but then I do push it down just a little bit so that when it's baking, it does not fall off of the muffin.
Okay.
So, you know, you can use your finger or your spoon and just push it down just a little bit there. And when you're making your topping here for the streusel, you don't want to add too much butter. If you do, you're going to end up with it being pretty too much liquid or buttery, and then it kind of goes down to the bottom of the muffin a lot quicker. So there we go. So now let's get that, and then they'll be ready to pop in the in the oven, excuse me. And this would be great for a Sunday brunch, and you know, you have some fresh fruit and strawberries that are so much in season right now. It'd be just a nice Sunday brunch, but on any day. Doesn't have to be just Sundays.
Well, and if you just want to, if you bake a couple of these and you want to take a muffin to work, heat it up in the microwave, you know, for a mid-morning snack, that would be easy to do as well.
It probably might not even get all the way to work. Might eat it in the car on the way. Okay, so we've got that done, and that's all ready to go, and we're going to just pop them in the oven. So I'm going to have you open up the oven door.
And again, it was 350 that we heated the oven to?
Correct.
Okay.
That's 350, and now I'm going to put the timer to 25 minutes. And while our muffins are going to be baking, we're going to go into doing a rhubarb custard bars that are just really super. These are almost just like the custard rhubarb pie that I make, but it's a little bit easier, and I think it's easier to serve bars. They go further than a pie. So what we start out is with a cup of butter. You don't want that butter melted. And then you're going to have 2 cups of flour.
Did you take the butter just right out of the fridge so it's a firm?
Right, yes.
Okay.
Firm there, and then it calls for a 1/4 cup of sugar. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to blend this here and make it crumbly, you know, to put that in our pan, and we bake 10 minutes before. While that's baking, we get the filling ready to put on.
Okay.
So if you have
And is this a recipe that the crust has to cool before you put the filling in?
No, you're going to have the filling ready to go when you take that out of the oven and stuff and finish baking it. So.
Okay.
And again there, I believe it asks, we've preheated the oven to 350, and that's what our muffins are baking at right now. Don't they smell good?
They do.
They really do. And I do have a pastry, pie pastry thing here to work the dough, but if you don't have one of those, just kneading that with your hands will work just fine. You just want it nice and crumbly and mixed together there. And then we're going to put it in a 9x13 pan, but we do need that pan sprayed. So we want to grease that. So I'm going to let my handy helper here give that a spray there.
I don't know how handy am I am, but I can certainly spray it.
Okay. That was magnificent.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, that looks like that's mixed well. So I'll just we're going to put that. And we're just going to pour that in our pan here. And I like to use a glass pan for these bars because then you do refrigerate them also, and I just like the way a glass pan works better. Your crust browns nice, and depends upon what kind of a metal pan you have, you can actually get a metal taste from it if you have it in the fridge and you have it for a couple of days. So
Okay.
a good glass pan is, and it's a 9 by 13, so we're just going to push that down. And then this here we need to then bake for just 10 minutes before we put the filling on.
Do you bring it up on the sides very much, or I see just a little bit you're doing?
I did a little. You really don't need to bring it up on the sides very much at all. So, and just press it down with your hands. There. So, I'll just rinse my hands off here. Okay, well, I'm looking at, we have 5 minutes for the muffins to come out of the oven. So we're going to just set that over here until the muffins are done, and we'll take them out. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and mix our topping, filling in on the bars.
Okay.
So again, I'm going to use my electric mixer. I have it here. It's coming nice and handy, and it asks for 2 cups sugar. So we'll put 2 cups sugar in there. And it says 7 tablespoons of flour, and that just helps, your rhubarb and cream mixture so it doesn't run over. It just kind of helps set that more like a custard. So I did pre-measure 7 tablespoons of flour. And it asks for 3 eggs. And I like to crack my eggs into a bowl to make sure that they're good and then there's nothing wrong with them. And then it's going to ask for 1 cup of whipping cream.
I also like to crack my eggs into a bowl, not only to make sure that they're good, but I have a tendency to get little eggshells in there, and it's easy to get out of a small bowl than it is a big mixing bowl.
Correct. So we'll put a cup of whipping cream in there. And I always like to use a spatula and get everything out. Can't have nothing go to waste. And that. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to beat this up here.
Now you use your electric mixer a lot in your baking and your cooking. And is this something that a little hand mixer can do well with,
Yes.
or this is just more convenient because you're actually not having to do much of the work?
Right, I can do something else and just have it beating. It's just that, I do a lot of cooking or baking, so it just comes in handy. But definitely a little hand mixer works just fine. So I'll just scrape that down here. And we're just going to mix it well. It doesn't have to be beaten for any X amount of time, like a minute or anything like that. Just till the eggs and everything are thoroughly beaten. And now that it's nice and creamy. So that's there. And then it asks for 5 cups of finely chopped rhubarb.
Okay.
And again, for this recipe, because of the season, fortunate we have fresh rhubarb. But you can also use frozen rhubarb. And if you have frozen rhubarb, you're going to want to make sure it's thawed and make sure you drain it, because it might be fairly juicy because of the freezing and the extra moisture in it. So, but we have the frozen rhubarb. It asks for 5 cups rhubarb.
And you said fresh. This is fresh rhubarb,
This
not
is
frozen.
yes, I have the fresh rhubarb because, like I said, we're lucky we have that season right now. And like I said, it's the nice ruby rhubarb. But, and, you know, again, when I cut my rhubarb here, I had a little bit of extra, and so I just throw it in. Don't ever let it go to waste. Another half a cup or extra rhubarb is not going to make a difference. So we've got that filling mixed, and it's going to be ready to put on top of the rhubarb or the crust here in just a moment. So, and I heard the timer go off for our muffins, so we should be able to get those checked, and they should be ready to come out. Okay, let's look at how nice they look. And so I'm going to put this in the oven, and like I said, that's going to be for 10 minutes. And I actually have a convection bake on my oven, and when I'm making a crust like this, I like to put it on convection bake, and it'll just brown the crust a little bit better.
Okay.
You know, but without, I mean, just regular bake is going to work just fine also.
Okay.
But for those that do have the convection bake, something like that will really comes in nice.
Great.
Okay. So here's our muffins, and so we're going to take them out and put them all on our cooling rack. And look at how nice that streusel looks on top of that filling. Plus, you know, really how great it smells. So you're going to want to take them out, and I'll have you help me here, and we'll just dip them out. And being we use the cupcake papers, it makes it nice just to be able to get them out so easily. So if you didn't get a corner sprayed, you don't have to worry about digging it out.
Right.
So there we go.
I could see where this would go over really well again when you have company for like a brunch with some fresh fruit.
Yeah.
It'd be a really good treat.
Muffins are always good. And like I said, it's good for even that afternoon or evening snack. You need something before you go to bed. Okay, does that just not look good enough to eat?
Well, of course it looks good enough to eat. So I want to devour it right now.
Well, I think we can. I still have this one in the paper here, but I took this one out, and I just wanted to cut it open and just to have you see that, you know, with that rhubarb in there, you don't really see a lot of rhubarb, but boy, does that just make it delicious, and it keeps them nice and moist. And now with a little bit of fruit, I think we have a good brunch. Or mid-afternoon or mid-morning snack, I should say.
Definitely.
Nice
or
cup of coffee.
Mid-evening snack with, you know, a glass of milk would be wonderful as well.
Yeah, that's correct. So there we go. Oh, hey, the oven is beeping. We have the crust done. I'll just turn that off and take the crust. Now it's not going to look real browned at all, but I mean it is turning just a little brown, but it's just enough to start it with the baking process so that the crust is nice and baked, you know, when the time is done for the rest of it. So like I said, we just put the rest on here and spread it out.
Now, if you wouldn't bake the crust before you put the rhubarb on, would you probably end up with a soggy crust? Is that kind of why you pre-bake it?
I would assume so. I mean, that's the recipe calls for pre-baking, and I certainly have other recipes that, you know, you pre-bake a crust before you're putting the filling on. So, yes, just to make sure that the crust is nice and done. Okay, so we just spread that on there, and now we're going to put it back into the oven for about 45 minutes.
Okay.
So the pan is hot. Then I'm going to need to, it's there. Okay. So we'll put that on. And this time I'm going to take it off a convection bake and put it on my regular bake cycle instead of on convection. And again, like I said, we're going to put it in there for 45 minutes. And then when that is done, it needs to cool for a little bit. And then there is a cream cheese topping we put on that. That's really just makes it extra special. So.
All right, I can't wait.
All right. Timer went off, and now we have that. And we're going to just bring it on over here. And just look at how pretty that rhubarb looks on top.
It does.
It just makes it a nice custard. And that what we're going to do now is we want to let it cool for, until it sets, the custard. If you have a couple hours, that's fine. If you don't have that much time, I think, as soon as it sets, there's a cream cheese topping we're going to put on it. Just makes them the gooeyest, best bars you can have. So you can see how nice and firm it's to the touch. So we're going to mix up our topping. It asks for 2 3-ounce packages of cream cheese, but I'm just going to go ahead and use 8-ounce package here and just cut a little bit off and just have your eyeball measurement right there. So
this isn't something you go, oh, it's just 8 ounces, just throw it all in?
If you know you're not going to be using your cream cheese for a while, absolutely, put it in. It'll be just fine. And half a cup of sugar and half a teaspoon of vanilla. So there, and then we want to mix that until smooth. That'll only just take a few minutes, and then from there we're going to fold in a cup of whipping cream.
Okay.
So just mix that really well. And again, I think you could do well if your cream cheese wasn't, if you had it on the counter for a little bit where it's starting to soften. I think you could use just a whisk like this and blend it probably pretty well. Even your topping like that, you could use a wire whisk and not worry about a mixer. So, well, that looks nice and creamy. So that was 6 ounces of cream cheese, a half a teaspoon of vanilla, and a half a cup of sugar.
Okay.
And now it asks to fold in a cup of whipping cream. So we used the cup of whipping cream for in there, so I know I just have a cup left right here, so I'm going to just pour that in. And I'm not going to turn that on very high because I just basically want it nice and blended, not whipped, real high or whatever. And then once it's on your bars, you're going to put that in the fridge, and I would let that set for probably a couple of hours too, and going to be ready to go.
Okay.
And this, with the cream cheese in there, it sets up really fast. I don't, I've served it or taken it in a lot less time than a couple of hours because it does set up fast. But like I said, you're going to want to store that definitely in the fridge.
I can see that with the cream cheese topping. That's always the best.
Right. And your filling, you have the cream, and it is a custard type bar, so that's always best to have in the fridge. So, but just be prepared for that fridge to get open often until it's gone.
I can see that.
Okay. All right, there we go. Now we have a nice, well, I think this would be great to take for a potluck picnic or something like that too, or a family, gathering. And, with 4th of July coming up, we have all those outdoor barbecues and picnics and stuff.
Definitely family reunions that usually happen over the summer, especially over the 4th of July weekend. Definitely that would be an awesome treat for for your family.
Oh, yes. And I think, even though that topping isn't real set, I think we could actually cut a piece and just show you what it looks like.
Okay. We want to thank you again, Laverne, for making these delicious muffins and this dessert today. There's going to be so many people that I'm sure are going to try this, being it's rhubarb season like we've talked about. So again, we would like to thank you for joining us on Cooking Crave today, and I hope you enjoy these recipes. To get a copy of these recipes, go to Consolidated's webpage, www.ctctel.com, and please submit your favorite recipe for us to cook for you. Thank you so much and have a great day.